Anyway, it's 2 o'clock. We're very close to it.
Number somewhere in the world.
Well, it says 1:59 here, so I'm going to call that.
Live and in color.
There you go.
Everybody up?
That works better than a gavel.
Okay.
People with hearing issues.
Don? I can keep talking? Oh, okay. I'll call this meeting to order, and I would ask that anyone has a pecuniary conflict of interest to declare it now or at the time. And seeing none, we'll go on with our delegations. So we have Dennis Gagnon, Operations Manager, and Monique Allaire, Program Specialist for the Fire Marshal Office. And they're here to give us a presentation. We requested that they come in to talk about our departments and whether we're doing things as we should, or whether there's some things we can do better, or just an update. So, welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of council. It's a pleasure for us to be here this afternoon. It was introduced Monique Allaire. Monique is the program specialist. She comes from London, and I'm the operations manager for Southwestern Ontario, so I cover from Muskoka down to Windsor, and I come from the Midhurst office, so just outside Barrie. So it was a wonderful day for travel. I'm glad that the storm went my way, so I could beat the storm going this way. Now, if we can just keep it that way until tomorrow morning, we'll be great. And I apologize that your local fire protection advisor, Paul Dow, isn't available to be with us today. Paul is still taking some personal time as a result of the unfortunate incident that happened to his family earlier in the year. So it's my understanding that back in October we received some communications from some folks about what some questions that had arisen regarding the fire board, the operation of the fire department, etc. And we suggested that the best way for us to communicate with you would be all together as opposed to piecemealing it and answering emails. So we all hear the same presentation, same story. So what we've done is we've created just probably a 15 to 20 minute little presentation here on what we believe all councils need to know. And I'm very well aware of your work that you've done over the past year. I did attend the Mayor's Summit back in last, I guess January, February. It must have been January because I was off in February. So we're back at the Mayor's Summit, and I know that you've had some other communications with the Ministry of Labor and with our office. And on behalf of Shane Mitz, I'm pleased to announce that, or advise you that there is work being done. The OFM and Ministry of Labor are in the final throes of getting that road show together, so that they will be making presentations throughout the province. Actually, they're making one tomorrow at the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs. It's not the same presentation, but it is an information session for the fire chiefs of the province based on the comments that we've heard and received over that. So just quickly, what we're going to talk about, we're going to talk a little bit about municipal governance, due diligence, how it affects the municipality, 3 lines of defense. We believe in the fire service and the Office of the Fire Marshal are the 3 lines that municipalities must look after. How a fire department is established, what the Fire Protection and Prevention Act states, and in particular municipal responsibilities, the responsibilities of a fire chief and the role, municipal agreements, what municipal agreements are and what they need to be, our essential seminar, and just quickly a summary. So there are 2 primary pieces of legislation that impact the fire service. Those are the Fire Protection and Prevention Act and the Municipal Act. And if we look at your flow chart there, you'll see that our act goes down, talk about council's responsibility, establishing and regulating bylaws, municipal bylaws, core services, and other legislation that goes on. So a council of a municipality may establish, maintain, and operate a fire department through an establishing and regulating bylaw, and that's defined under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. We suggest that in order to do that efficiently and effectively, you describe what your core services are. And core services are developed based on risk management, governance, and the capability to provide and conduct a service safely, efficiently, and effectively. The Fire Protection and Prevention Act also gives you the power to pass bylaws under this act. Under the Municipal Act, Part 6, Section 224 states it's the role of council, A, to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of its municipality, and D, subsection 1, to determine what the fire department is required to do, legislation and risk assessment, and what it is capable of doing, operational planning and communicating it. We look at due diligence under Black's Law definition of due diligence. The diligence reasonably expected from and orderly exercised by a person who seeks to satisfy a legal requirement or to discharge an obligation. Municipal councils have ways of managing risk. They can identify it, doing a risk assessment, looking at the community and life safety. They can accept it by doing certain tasks. What is reasonable and practical? They can mitigate it by taking other steps to manage it. They need to communicate what you, the municipality, and your services can and can't do, and recognize the implications. It's important to understand that the municipality needs to identify the risk options and address the risk. It's the responsibility of council to act on it and provide direction. The fire department is responsible to implement it. All goes back to due diligence. The municipality are the ones who set the level of service. The fire department is the one who carries it out. We look at the 3 lines of defense as public fire safety education, fire standards and enforcement, and emergency response. Previously, in the past, we would have told you that emergency response should be that first line of defense. But we've seen, traditionally, the numbers go down because of the efforts of the fire departments, the efforts of the Fire Prevention and Protection Act, Protection and Prevention Act, the building code. Last year, touch wood, if there's some here, we had our lowest history recorded fire deaths in the province of Ontario. The number was approximately 20 below the year before that. Such a low. So it was just under the 70 mark, somewhere, I think 67, 68. When we hear about fires, when we hear about impaired driving and the impacts of people dying, that becomes a big public outcry. But we never really hear it when people die in a fire. We look at it more as a tragedy. But most fire deaths can be attributed to lack of working smoke alarms, carelessness of the people, young families perishing because the parents took out the batteries of the smoke alarm or it was making noise. So that's why we look at public fire safety education now as being primary. We know that youngsters take home those messages. All we have to do is look around the room and ask how many, even over the years, your children brought home safety messages and forced the parents to do it. One of the prime examples that my boss likes to tell people is that when he was the fire chief of Burlington, he could go up to a class of kids that came into the fire hall and ask them how many times their parents made their parents check the smoke alarms in their fire escape planning. And he was pleasantly surprised that more and more our public education is doing that impact. Public education needs to be primary. So in order for that to be done, the fire service needs to do that. Fire safety and enforcement is very difficult. We appreciate that nobody likes to give tickets. The fire department, we have always looked upon as being the nice guys who come and save us from whatever peril we're in. But because of the fact that fire departments are doing their job, people are being charged for not having working smoke alarms, they're being charged for not complying with inspection orders, whatever the case may be, we're seeing a marked decrease in fire deaths. I just saw that. It is somewhat of a tough pill to swallow sometimes, but there are ways of resolving that. We know that. We know that there are other methods of issuing the ticket. It's not necessarily the firefighters on the back of the truck doing it. But we all need to ensure that fire safety standards and codes are enforced. And then we look at emergency response as our third line of defense. We know that emergencies are going down, but we always know that there will be fires. We can't help the fact that Mother Nature decides that it's going to be a heavy, snowy, wet day, and breaks down the lines, and we have fires